How are you doing?
Welcome to GamesBeat University.
Thanks.
Oh my gosh! So, Sibel is the CEO and principal of 47 PR, a leading media relations firm in our craft.
That is correct.
You're based in Los Angeles.
We have offices in LA, San Francisco, and New York.
I'm
But
sorry, I did
yes,
not
we
mean to diminish. You
started.
are globally. Sorry, originating. I'm from LA. So, okay, yes.
That's right. We started in LA. We've known each other a long time, so you know that.
More than a minute. So one of the challenges that so many companies have is communicating out to the world. And I'd love to sort of take our time we have and maybe talk about some of the phases that companies go through in communicating out, and maybe what their needs are and what sort of questions they should be asking for media relations, because they're so focused on their games, sometimes they don't have the time or really expertise to figure out how to communicate out all the awesome things they're doing.
Totally. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Well, gosh, I mean, you work with so many companies. I mean, you're with Supercell and Niantic. Gosh, EA. God, we'll list more as we go along. But the point being, you have a chance to touch across many parts of our craft, whether it be console games, VR, mobile, technology.
That's right.
So let's talk about those. What are some of the different needs just for companies that are just getting started in those spaces?
Yeah, so you're right. We work with lots of different companies, and some of them are really in the starting phases of, being brand new startups. Some of them are in their sort of mid phase where they're launching products. Maybe they're even pivoting to a new area. Some of them are hitting their growth and maybe even exit phase, and some of them are public companies, and we work with sort of bigger departments inside of those. So all of those needs can be quite different. Startups, I think, is what you want to ask.
I want to start with startups. Yeah, because I think that's the most interesting. I mean, if someone's already famous, right, they have specific huge needs. Huge needs. But let's start at the beginning. Yeah, for a startup developer, what are the sort of questions they should be asking as they're sort of first communicating out, even to begin to raise money? Like, they just have an idea and it's really good, a game that they're working on or a technology they're working on. What are some of the first questions they should be asking as far as public relations, as far as communicating out?
Yeah, so I mean, there's some startups that, by the way, have famous people involved
Yes.
already.
Oh, for sure.
Maybe it's their second venture or they started out somewhere else. But startups tend to share a set of needs, one of which is to figure out what their sort of positioning in the marketplace is. Some companies really think about this deeply and are already ready to talk about it in really crisp and clear ways. Others are really product-driven companies and haven't put much effort into thinking about what their differentiators are or what they sound like, if they sound similar, if they say it out loud, when they articulate themselves. So I think one of the first questions they need to ask themselves is, what do I need to get done now? We tend to be really goal-oriented in PR.
Yes.
So if it's really in the early phases, raising money can be really important,
Sure.
hiring people can be really important, and sort of making a mark so that people understand what you stand for is important. So in those early phases, having an in-house PR person or a PR partner with a firm like ours is helpful to identify market positioning, really get the first nugget of your story down, get some visibility, maybe a little bit of an anchor placement out there that people can refer to and understand who you are.
Just for people who aren't the lingo, so anchor placement means?
Meaning, if you do a story that kind of talks about the forming of the company, you're going to be able to talk about why you're doing it, what you're doing, what your sort of goals are, and have something referenceable that's public.
Though that's a great point. So I think that people want to be authentic.
That's right.
Right? And don't want to be too salesy, literally. And so there's a balance to be struck between talking about what they're doing and then talking about who they are and why they're doing it. So how do you think startups should be looking at that sort of balance of who am I and why am I doing this versus what am I contributing and how people will experience it?
Yeah, I mean, some founders are sort of instinctively really clear about these things, and it's just a matter of communicating them out. In other cases, it's a matter of going through an exercise where you sort of identify your voice, what your sort of filters for communication are. What do you want to sound like? Not just what are you doing, but how does the company communicate? Is it a casual company? Is it a formal company? Is it a company that speaks frequently to its customers and fans? Is it a company that's a little bit more mysterious? There's all kinds of different ways people can think about what they want to appear to be.
No, yeah, and without sort of being so as like, oh, well, just be yourself, because that's not necessarily what everyone always wants to be in their public business persona. How do people go through those exercises? Is that something you do with a PR person? Is that something you do online? Like, how does someone explore their identity?
I mean, ideally, it's in person with the founders
Okay.
And other stakeholders in the company. And it's sort of a live exercise. And I think you have to be authentic. Otherwise, the message isn't going to stick. And so it's more so, it's not really like, what outfit do you want to buy? It's more like, what are the authentic messages that we can highlight but really be clear about and that are going to be durable?
Gotcha. So, let's see. So every word you give me, so durable versus original. How important is it to be distinct? Right? Like, suppose, right, when you get down to it, what you're doing, what you want to express or how you want to express yourself is not necessarily distinct. How important is it to have you got to have a gimmick, to have your own.
Well, you want
calling
to be
card?
distinct for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Regardless, but originality isn't always a distinction, right? I think originality is something people strive for, but not every single startup is actually purely original. You
Yes.
kind of have to figure out what is authentically original and what isn't. What problem are you solving? Are there other competitors in the space? Can you really say you're the first or the only? A lot of people throw around those kinds of words, and you kind of need to know the market and where you sit and how exactly you're differentiated.
Oh my! Another question, I guess, is many creators or developers are interacting with the public for the first time. How do you help prepare people for the back and forth? Right? You can't just do an interview or just make a statement. A statement's going to earn response. A statement's going to build community that also needs to be served.
Right.
How do you prepare for that for people who've maybe never had that experience? Right? They are working on craft, but not necessarily the craft of interacting with people.
Yeah, I mean, taking a step back, first of all,
Sure.
we think of communications as being integrated across
Okay.
a few different practices. There's classic PR, which you were, referencing as media relations, but
Yeah.
then there's social communication, which are usually through a number of different channels. There's, communicating with influencers potentially. And so what you really need to do is take a step back and kind of look at what are the things that you want to say and how do you want to engage with the various sort of conduits like media or influencers, and how do you want to communicate with people directly, a la your consumers or community. And then you can kind of develop, what is your voice, what's your cadence, what's your style, and you can prepare people, not just the founders, but people in different departments for how to communicate.
Well, that's, of course, because you're leading the field. I get it. It's much more 360. So the way of thinking, even of interacting with the public, and even the definition of PR has evolved.
True.
Maybe give people out there a feel for how the cadence is different now for people who are doing free to play or mobile games than maybe if you were thinking about console games, right? And if you grew up with console games as a person who experienced them, you have a cadence in your mind,
Right.
of how you experience the PR, and you might think that I'm making my indie game or my VR or AR experience, and I'm going to have that same sort of cadence that I experienced as a consumer. How are the cadences different?
Yeah, you make a good point. A lot of people have transitioned, for example, from traditional console and PC games to free-to-play and mobile, which is not always, but largely free-to-play. And there is a different cadence. When you were trying to help people make, buying decisions for how to spend $60, you might have a longer ramp where you're talking more about the product and exposing them more and more frequently, and maybe you have longer campaigns. With a free-to-play title, it's less about money spent up front. It's more about time investment, and you can get people in free, so maybe the campaign ramp won't be as long. But I will say, I don't really believe in super templated approaches. So to us, every time you come and you have a particular kind of product, no matter what kind of game it is, we're happy to flip the script and try something totally different based on as you said, authentically what feels right for that particular product. So I wouldn't say, there's X amount of months ramp for one kind of product and then it has to be much shorter for another one. There's some guidelines, but really it needs to be custom designed for each one.
Well, and obviously things like Twitch have changed the world. You guys are
Yeah.
very active in esports. You guys work with Red Bull Media and Raptor and a number of people in esports. And it's like this audience right here where they are very of the now.
Right.
They got questions right now.
Right.
They want answered, which is awesome and appreciated. How do you or how does one educate yourself, or how does working with an agency help you prepare to deal with this generation of accessibility and interactivity, right?
Yeah.
Where it's not going to be like, put an article, who will read the article, maybe I'll send you a note back. It's, no, let's talk
Instantly,
right now
right
about,
now.
yeah, right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you have a partner who has that 360, perspective that we're talking about, you're going to look at all those channels, and something like Twitch that has a lot of immediacy,
Yes.
is going to be part of the mix where you communicate. Sometimes that's about being like a developer being
Yes.
on Twitch and talking to the audience directly. Sometimes it's about streaming a game. Sometimes it's about using the platform for just a Q&A sort of format. But I think it's really about at what point in the product or company cycle do you want to do this?
Sure.
And when is it beneficial to be doing something direct to audiences versus through a more mediated platform like media relations?
Yeah, and it must be sort of cool too. I know you obviously also work with big companies. The biggest thing going on right now, of course, is Niantic, another client of yours, and there's something where the way that people are experiencing, or the story, right? The story of their product is happening in the real world around us all right now. There's probably people Pokemon going while we're talking. It's so much a part of what's going on right now. How do you help companies navigate, like in this sort of new connected world, when so much of the story is happening outside of their walls, if that makes sense? Like, like so much of the game, so much of it isn't their story, even of creating it. It really is the experience of people playing and sharing and having unique experiences outside their doors. How do you, maybe the point is, how do you keep them in the conversation?
Well, I mean, there's sort of, something as big as that, it takes on a viral nature of its own,
Sure.
and it's really exciting to see. There's some really wonderful player stories in any community, not just, you checked Pokemon Go, but we've seen this with lots of different games.
Sure.
Where there's terrific player stories where we might sort of spotlight those player stories and enhance them a little bit and bring visibility to those, so people can share in that, like,
Yes.
human interest stories and delight.
Sure.
There are other things where, it's more sort of planned agility, responding to what customers want or what the press are asking. And in some cases, it's letting the stories just happen. You don't have to have your hand in every single thing necessarily.
No, for sure. I was just thinking out loud. I won't fixate on Pokemon Go, but in any big game, well, just for a second.
How many times have you asked about Pokemon Go in this conference?
It comes up a lot.
Yeah,
It comes up.
okay.
And
Just
I've only
checking.
caught one Pokemon at the conference, but
Okay.
I guess the point, my question specifically was, and we'll move on, was I imagine, for example, that there are new Pokemon Go influencers that have arisen in just the past couple weeks, right? And new ones in each
Sure.
territory it launches, who are perhaps relevant to the discussion,
Yeah.
right? And so now, like, instantly, like, new types of influencers are able to emerge that there's no way to have psychically prepared for,
Yeah.
right? They just happen. And so I guess whether working with an agency or whether you're coaching someone up externally or someone just wants to be self-taught, how would you help people interact with other people who are now influential on their success but are external to their development and creative process?
I mean, there's lots of good examples of this.
Okay,
You've seen
perfect.
it with, League of Legends. You've seen
Sure.
it with Minecraft. You
Yes.
see it in even, small indie games that have online communities where I mean, first of all, the companies can really pay attention and identify or figure out systems to help identify who these influencers are.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also lots of different things that they can do. Sometimes these communities sort of self-moderate. People help each other with, tutorials. Sort of, there's, community monitoring that sort of happens organically, and you can kind of stoke that and support that in different ways. But I think what you're talking about a lot is when community-oriented games or games with big communities
Sure.
really flourish, you have to dedicate time to kind of getting to know your players and then identifying who to support and give voices to.
Got it. Yeah, you guys work with Riot, so of course your experience, I guess, Niantic is happening again, EA. Yes, a lot of companies. So that's something that you have to, I guess, people expect that you come with expertise. Like they probably go, so when we get big, right, you're going to help us navigate through these new influencers, these new audiences, these new communities that are going to emerge around our game.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it's about supporting the influencers that are rising up, but sometimes those influencers are really nurtured from inside the company, from the community departments.
Sure.
And it's more from our side giving, a little bit of a spotlight onto the player stories.
Absolutely.
Or it might be sort of how to navigate the increasing interest in the company. So, we don't really do community relations directly.
Okay.
It's more advising on maybe how to reflect those stories in the press.
Let's give some advice.
Okay.
Some people, in their perception, because they have not learned all the value yet, will be like, I don't have money for people. In fact, people will brag something. They go, I don't spend any money on marketing. I don't spend any money on this. Mm-hmm. But they still need guidance, some thoughts. If you were to give someone just some thoughts, some things to consider as they start to communicate outward for the first time, whether it be about themselves, their game, what have you, what would be some very just basic things for people to be just thinking about before they speak, before they do that tweet, that interview, what have you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I would start with saying identify what your goals are at the different phases that your company's at.
Okay.
If you're so that you're not spending money and energy just to have PR. PR for PR's sake. We tend to be more goal-oriented. If you know what your goals are, you can match your time spent as well as energy spent as well as messaging accordingly. So that's number one. The other thing is figure out, I think, what the most leveraged way to communicate is.
Okay.
In some cases, that's speaking directly to your consumers. In some cases...
Tell me when you say leveraged way, tell me what that means for the layperson out there.
Well, I mean, it's some games will really truly benefit from classic PR and the sort of the reviews or the sort of endorsement that comes from press.
Sure.
Some games don't necessarily benefit from it at the user acquisition stage, but more in the brand building stage. So there are certain kinds of games that we will tell our clients, we can support this in PR, but your real user acquisition is not going to come from PR. But what we can do is help build the brand around your company and the game and really sort of enhance that.
For sure.
So being goal-oriented and knowing where to put emphasis and money is really important.
How important are live events, like going to like a PAX or going to a smaller convention near you wherever you are, as far as getting your word out, like sort of hand to hand with people versus through statements or through media?
I mean, we've seen the PAX and those kinds of
Sure.
events be super important for connecting with communities directly. And if you're an indie developer in
Sure.
particular, being able to interact with people that support you and kind of pitch your game to them and watch them play and get feedback, that's super exciting for an indie developer. For bigger companies too, being able to do events where they host their biggest fans and celebrate their brands and IP can be super powerful. Those kinds of things can be really great for connecting with the community directly. Some of them are good for PR and some of them are not as strategic for PR.
Okay. Well, clearly you work with some of the largest companies and also some of the
Smallest.
emerging independent ones as well. How do they find you? Because we are reaching time. How does one find? I know, right? It flies by.
It's really
It
easy.
does. No. How do people find 47 PR?
Oh, well, they can just write us hello@47.com and we will
Spelled out.
HELLO
At-
at FORTY
Oh, yeah, no, yes.
SEVEN.
Well, no, because you know what they'll do. Right?
Add the U.
No, they'll do the number.
Oh, right. That's true. That's true. But yeah, we like to talk to everybody and help anybody we can.
Well, that is awesome. Thank you so much, Sibel, for making time to help us today.
Thanks,
And thank you,
Gordon.
audience, for staying with us.